up, my ducks and drakes? Welcome to the Crowded Lake, and today we're reading Chapter 11 of A Lesson in Practicality by ResidentAnchor on Wattpad. If you'd like to support the author or the fic itself, go ahead and use the links in the description below. With that being said, here's Chapter 11, Giving Chase. Logan made his way down the street of the city, walking away from the noise the center of downtown provided. He didn't want to get lost in the sea of people right now. He usually kept to quieter places. The quiet let him think, where he could relax, where he could pretend everything in his life was normal for a bit. A part of him felt bad, leaving Patton and Virgil in front of the store alone. He was concerned for two running off after Thomas, but it had been so much at once. His brain told him to get away and take a moment, and he didn't think for once and listened. He needed a moment to sort through everything that had happened. Barely 2 blocks down the street, and he heard footsteps quickly approaching. He turned and saw Patton running towards him with Virgil falling behind. I know you want to be alone, but you already shouldn't walk through the city by yourself. Patton stopped and panted a bit, catching his breath. We probably also shouldn't split up anymore. Roman is busy and 2 is off and who knows where. I apologize, Patton. You are right. That's okay. You can keep walking quietly until you're ready to talk. Logan shook his head and looked over at the two. No, it's quite all right. Just a bit of time was enough to ease me some. Are you sure? Patton looked concerned, but took the nod as enough of an answer. Well, all right. He turned and looked over at Virgil, who was still a bit out of breath from running. Gee, kiddo, I should take you around town more. Yeah, I know I'm not exactly the most fit person. Virgil took a deeper breath and stood up straighter. I'll be okay, Pat. We can worry about that later. Right. Logan cleared his throat. The man we identified as Thomas seems to be the same person both Roman and I had an encounter with. I still do not remember what happened during my encounter, but with the limited data we have, it might be a sort of mimic ability. Virgil nodded. Yeah, we sort of figured that one out. Logan sighed and fiddled with his tie. I have a growing list of theories we really should work out. Oh, more science tests, huh? Virgil perked up a bit. I actually have one for Roman I was meaning to mention. Logan cocked an eyebrow, but simply nodded. One thing at a time. We will shelf that conversation for a later day. So, now what? Patton asked. 2 is still out there and Roman is preoccupied. Do we go and try to find them, or do we just go home? As easy as it would be to try to track him down again, I am not quite up for it now. Logan glanced away, looking at the barren street. I don't know how long he'll hold my ability for, so I don't wish to find him again today. That's okay. No need to push yourself. Patton put a hand on Logan's shoulder. 2 will find his way back to me. I'm sure of it. I believe in him as if he were, well, me. Logan looked over at Patton with a bemused look. He is you, Patton. So we're just gonna go home? Virgil spoke up. Yes, well, perhaps retreating back to where we know 2 will go when he needs to, as well as regrouping and coming up with our next plan of attack. Remind me to play a game of Risk with you one day, Logan. Virgil let out with a snark. A game called Risk does not seem like the type of thing you would enjoy. Logan smirked to himself. Since you never seem to take any. Oh, was that a joke? Virgil was surprised. Well, look who's feeling better. Aw, let's go home and have our family game night. I can even bring out 3 to fill Roman's role. He can start saying random Disney quotes too. Not the same, but it'll be like he's with us. Nah, no thanks. Virgil spun towards the center of town. Let's not ruin our night away from Roman, shall we? Across town, 2 is in a crowd of people, pushing his way through as quickly as he can, excusing himself as he did. He knew the others weren't following anymore, but he was so close and hadn't lost sight of Thomas yet. He didn't want to give up. He was able to get a break in the crowd and sprinted, reaching out, grabbing Thomas's wrist, tugging back gently. Thomas spun around, yanking his arm out of his reach. "Stop! No, He took a step back, holding his hands. "I don't want anything else weird happening." "Could you at least let me explain? We lost track of everyone else. It's just us." 2 held up his hands, keeping his distance. I don't mean any harm. We were getting along before, weren't we?" "Logan already explained enough. How do you keep finding me?" He took a careful step back. "What do you want?" To be friends," 2 shouted. "Is that really so bad?" "Yes, maybe." Thomas ran his hands through his hair. "Look, I was living a normal life until Logan showed up one day, talking like some dude out of a comic book, but he didn't make any sense. What do you want me to do about it?" "Oh." 2 slowly dropped his hands, his face falling into a concerned frown. Does nothing happen unless we're around?" Thomas marched closer, getting right into his face. "Well, he showed up one day and suddenly I could hear people's thoughts. It happened again back there," Thomas angrily whispered, motioning back the way they came. 2 leaned back a bit. Maybe your power only works around us. Or copying ours, maybe." "I don't have powers!" Thomas took a step back and spun around, taking a deep breath. "I'm not like you. I can't be." He put his hands through his hair again. I'm not." 2 watched the man calm down, shoulders falling a bit. He turned around with a frown, analyzing him. "I'm sorry. Logan didn't remember meeting you, and we all wanted to find out why and got overexcited." No. Thomas dropped his arm to his side again, looking away sheepishly. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have yelled. It took me by surprise, I guess." He looked up at 2 and gave a small smile. "Can we just start again?" 2 perked up at that and let out a friendly hand. "My name is Patton, or Pat 2. You can call me 2. Thomas took the hand cautiously and shook it. "Thomas." He pulled his hand away, looking down at it. "Nothing happened this time." "Or the time back in the store," 2 nodded. "I'm not the original. Maybe that's why?" "Right." Thomas nodded and looked up at 2. "So, Logan doesn't remember me?" 2 shook his head. Said he knew he met someone like us, but didn't remember anything else. Thomas nodded, looking around. "Can we talk somewhere maybe less crowded?" "Oh!" 2 perked up. "There's a dog park a few blocks away. We can go there." I like going there on my downtime, since I'm not allowed to have any pets in my apartment. Sounds perfect. 2 walked forward and led the way. The quiet between them filled the passing conversations of the people passing by. The park was a bit out of the way, but 2 knew the ease of the familiar and friendly environment would make it easy for him. Also, who didn't love dogs? It wasn't as busy as the day grew on, but that left them alone on the bench facing the park as a few sparse dogs ran around, playing with one another. 2 motioned for Thomas to sit as he took his own seat. "I think I know what happened with Logan," Thomas let out, staring out at the field. "I wasn't sure it actually happened. I kind of thought it was a dream at first, but I had this little notebook. It must have been his or something." Thomas motioned to describe and show how small it was. "Just fit in your pocket. He was carrying it around, and he showed it to me. It was all about us, just names and not too detailed, but he started going on about powers and how he could read minds. Thomas leaned back on the bench. I thought he was crazy. I was ready to just ignore him, being nice and telling him I wasn't interested in whatever he was selling, but that didn't work. Then he reached out. Thomas turned to Patton. I kind of jumped and told him to let go and leave me alone. I think the words "forget I ever existed" may have been said. Two's face lit up with understanding. If your ability works by touch, you could have been using his against him. He said he could give suggestions to people. I didn't think he would actually wipe someone's memory. I was afraid of that. Thomas? Two leaned over and put a hand on his shoulder for comfort. We aren't asking you to do anything you don't want to. Logan was just concerned since he didn't remember, and we wanted to find out why. Thomas silently nodded and looked back at the field. I'm not asking you to do anything you aren't comfortable with. But maybe we could... Two sighed and pulled his hand back. We could help you understand this ability more. Just enough to make sure you have control over it and it's not something else. Or you can go home and we will leave you alone. Thomas didn't answer as he kept his eyes on the playful dogs running around. He sighed and looked over at Two for the first time since sitting down. How many of you are there? Sorry, of us, I guess. Oh! Two perked up at the question. Well, there's Virgil. He was at the store too, but he's a big worrywart. He's sweet though. He pretends he's not. Then there's Roman. He had a date tonight, so he wasn't there, but he's a big softie too. He sings Disney songs all the time and performs at the theater. Oh, he does? Thomas perked up and smiled. I do too. Which theater? I don't think I've met him. Two shrugged. Sorry, don't know. He could tell you all about it, though. Thomas looked a bit unsure, but nodded. And what can they do? You make duplicates and Logan's does stuff with the mind? Oh, well... Two shifted a bit on the bench. That's okay. Two looked up at him. It's not fair for you to tell me their secrets. I can just ask them myself. Oh. Two jumped up from the bench. That's perfect. We could go back to the apartment right now and you can meet Virgil and... Two stopped mid-rant. I don't know if they're home yet, but they should be soon. Thomas laughed and smiled up at him. We can go another day. I really should be getting home. Maybe order a pizza since I never bought those groceries. Oh, sorry about that, Two said, smiling. We had pizza last night. Recommend it. Thomas stood up and turned completely towards Two. You know, today was weird. Strange beyond words, but he smiled up at the other. Thanks for chasing after me. I probably would have worried about it forever. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Here, let me have your number. I'm sure the others are worried, but we can sort this out a different day. He handed his phone over, showing the new contact screen. Two grabbed the phone and typed everything in before handing it back. Thanks. It was a pleasure doing business with you, Thomas. The two parted with a wave and Two let out a sigh, heading for the nearest bus stop. He got to the exit of the park before freezing, patting down his pockets. I don't have bus money, he whispered to himself, looking around. Guess I'm walking home then. Patton stared out the window in the living room, watching the light fade away from the city. Two isn't home yet. Don't worry, Patton. He'll return when he can. Logan spoke, now looking up from the crossword he was doing to pass the time. I felt his panic a little bit ago. You also stated that it passed quickly and was probably nothing. I know I did, but he still hasn't come home yet. What if something happened? What if he got lost or he... Patton.
Virgil walked into the living area, staring down the other. Listen, I know I'm the last person who should be saying this, but you can't worry about what-ifs all the time. You'll keep going down and down until you get yourself into a panic. Patton nodded and bit his lip, looking back out the window before turning away and taking a spot on the couch. You're right. I said I trusted him, and I do. So I just need to calm down and wait. I don't need him feeling my panic. The door suddenly cracked open and Patton bolted from his spot to the door. He stopped and looked up, and Roman froze in the doorway, concerned. Are you all right, Patton? How did things go? Patton sighed and his shoulders fell. They went kind of okay. He sort of ran off and two chased after him, and we haven't seen him since. Oh. Roman walked in and pulled Patton into an embrace. Come here, Padre. It hasn't been too terribly long. He'll be back. Patton pulled out of the hug reluctantly and nodded up at Roman. You're right. Thomas seemed nice too. I'm sure if he did catch up to him, everything would be okay. Thomas? Roman looked over Patton's shoulder at the others. Is that his name then? Yeah, he kind of freaked out on Logan and ran off, though. Roman's eyebrows knitted together in confusion. I thought this was the guy I ran into, with the electricity. Logan looked up from his crossword at Roman. Yes, we hypothesized that it might be a type of mimic ability of sort. Roman tilted his head at the thought and nodded. I see. That does make a bit of sense. Enough about this! Patton clapped his hands together. How was the date? Oh, Roman shrugged. It was all right. Just all right, Virgil spoke up. Doesn't sound too promising. I do not wish to judge based off of one date. The offer for another has been extended. He will be getting back to me about it. Roman spoke as if he was done with the topic. Is there anything for dinner? We had leftovers. I thought you would have eaten while you were out, Logan questioned. Are you all right? Yeah, it's fine. I'll grab a snack before I hit the hay. Virgil looked over at Patton, who was glancing at the doorway to the kitchen with concern. You're gonna worry, too, if you keep this up. Patton sighed and nodded. Perhaps a cup of tea will calm my nerves. He made his way into the kitchen as well. Roman took out a small container of pasta from the other night and turned, jumping when he saw Patton standing behind him. Geez, Patton! He placed a hand over his heart. You scared me there. You're usually not so quiet. Sorry, I'm just a bit worried. Would you like some tea? That sounds delightful. Patton took out 2 mugs as Roman placed the container in the microwave. He spun around and looked over at Patton. I know you want to ask. Patton reached for the kettle and started filling it with water. What do you mean? My date? Patton looked over and smiled. I'm not going to ask you about it since you don't want to talk about it. That's not what I said. Roman crossed his arms. I said you want to ask. People are naturally curious, but again, you don't want to talk about it. He looked over at Roman, who stared him down before diverting his eyes away. Unless you really do and you're waiting for me to ask. No. Roman looked up and smiled. Honestly, it was a boring date. Patton went back to making the tea, placing it on the stovetop when he froze. He looked up and over at Roman, who looked puzzled. He then turned back towards the other room and ran out without a word, abandoning any thought of making tea. Logan and Virgil looked up as Patton as he stared at the front door. Is everything all right? Logan spoke with a tone of concern. Patton nodded and started to smile, the door creaking its familiar screech and opened up, revealing an exhausted two walking in. Patton took a few steps forward before stopping himself. A flash of light, and out popped was another copy. 3, I demand you hug 2 for me. 3 didn't even hesitate as he ran up and grabbed 2 in a tight embrace. We were so worried, 3 cried out. Where were you? What happened? 2 pushed back and smiled sheepishly. I didn't have money for the bus. I had to walk back. Got a bit lost. Sorry. It takes longer to trek across the city than you think, especially during rush hour. Could you have not asked someone for change to take the bus? Logan questioned. Heavens, no! What if someone really needed that money? I couldn't do that. Virgil scoffed and chuckled to himself. Typical Patton. 2 walked past, 3 and up to Patton. I'm just glad to be home. Me too. He winked and 2 smiled, reaching forward and returning to his host in a flash. 3 walked forward and joined quickly, leaving Patton to let out a sigh of relief as he felt completely whole once more. Oh, yes! He perked up. Well, 2 certainly had a bit of an adventure. He spun around and smiled at Logan. I think I have some good news and a bit of explaining. The 3 sat down at the kitchen table as Patton retold the entire story from the beginning, filling in as to what happened after he left. Roman sat, engrossed in the story as he ate his pasta, Logan filling in any gaps Patton may have missed. Virgil sat quietly, absorbing the new information they had.
So, he has your phone number? Virgil spoke up, watching Patton nod. So we just wait for him to answer us? I guess so. Then what? Rowan pushed away his now empty plate. You said he could help figure out his abilities, so how exactly do we do that? We can make a whole day of it, Patton perked up. We could spend some time trying to figure out everyone's abilities in some way to make him feel more at ease. I can make us all lunch. You used the roof, right? Logan brought a hand to his chin, contemplating the idea. It could work. There have been a number of things I have been curious about. Remember when Roman mentioned being attacked by the mugger, but the punches did not hurt? What? Patton stood up, almost causing his chair to fall over. No punching. I'm not letting you guys purposely hit each other. Of course, Logan smiled. I was merely suggesting a way to test if we are simply more durable, or if it was just Roman. No, Patton crossed his arms. I don't like this idea. And we're not finding out if we are durable. That's that. No more discussing this. Man, Patton, you really are our dad, Roman muttered. Except that would make Logan our mom. Logan ignored the comment and turned to Virgil. Didn't you say you had an idea for Roman's abilities? Virgil looked unsure before perking up. Oh, yeah, I did. I want to keep it a surprise, though. He looked over at Roman, and the grin on his face grew with fake malicious intent. Don't worry. It shouldn't hurt you. Oh yeah, well I accept whatever challenge you throw my way. Patton pushed his chair in and clapped his hands together. Okay, children. Dad says it's time for bed. Okay. We've officially started to push that to its limit. Virgil got up and waved his hand. I'm off to bed. Night, guys. Me as well. Roman shot up from his chair and smiled at the 2. Good night, you 2. Have fun. Logan glanced over at Patton, baffled. Have fun sleeping? I do not understand what he meant. His tone indicated other intent. Patton shook his head. Don't worry about it, Lo. Have a good night. Patton woke up the next morning to the sound of his phone going off. He groaned and opened his eyes, noticing a bit of light in the sky. He picked up his phone and realized he slept through his alarm, but it was
still early. He had no work today, so no second alarm went off. Luckily, meaning he could sleep in a bit more. Quickly checking what had set off his phone, he shot up and put on his glasses. Hey, it's Thomas. Did Pat 2 make it home okay last night? Patton smiled quickly and responded. Thomas had actually answered. He wasn't quite sure if he would. Hey, it's Thomas. Did Pat 2 make it home okay last night? Patton smiled and quickly responded. Thomas had actually answered. He wasn't quite sure if he would. He added the contact and hopped out of bed, suddenly filled with excitement. He saw the coffee pot wasn't quite empty, a sign that Logan was probably still here, working from home. He usually made a pot and drank it throughout the day. He marched down the hall and knocked on the door, just to be sure. Logan, you still here? The door opened just a few seconds later. Morning, Patton. Do you require my assistance? No, I just wanted to let you know that Thomas texted me. He held up his phone, pointing at the screen. We can set up a day to run experiments now. Isn't that exciting? Logan quickly read the message and stood up straight. Yes, quite. Do tell me when he can make his way over one of these days. I feel we should clear the air, as you will, and make amends. Patton nodded and started typing out a flurry of messages in his excitement. He sat at the table in the kitchen as he scrolled through his phone, awaiting the arrival of a new message. Thomas seemed a bit nervous about the whole thing, but Patton was good at comforting people, and it seemed like 2 left a good impression on him. The tone announced the arrival of the new message, and Patton barely finished reading it before running down the hall, knocking repeatedly on the door. Logan opened it with a huff, watching Patton bounce up and down in place. Patton, you alright? You're giving me a headache with all the movement. Sorry, it's just, Thomas is free. Can he come over today? I can make us all snacks, and I can help out too since I'm here, and whoa, shh. Calm down. Logan held his hands. Thomas is willing to come over today? Yeah! Patton looked down at the phone. He said, I would rather do it now before I get too anxious and back out. And then he put a little laughy cry face, see? Patton shoved his phone in Logan's face, who simply pushed it down. Yes, wonderful Patton. He may come over whenever he feels comfortable. It will just be the 2 of us until after lunch, if that eases his nerves at all. The rest of Patton's morning was a whirlwind of running around and getting things cleaned up and ready. It took almost an hour before he realized he could cut his time in half by letting 2 help out, let alone 3. Thomas already knew about it, so he suddenly was all abuzz cleaning and cooking while 3 set up the cozy area for them on the roof. It was getting colder, so he made a nice warm lunch and some tea, not sure what Thomas would be drinking. The day flew by until he heard a hesitant knock on the front door. 2 opened it and smiled, pulling the other into a hug. Oh, it's so good to see you! Patton pulled back. It's me! I made it back safe. Thank you for asking. You're so sweet. Thomas smiled a bit, eyes darting around. Yeah, of course. I didn't think about you having a wait home until later, sorry. I should have offered money for a cab or something. Oh, no worries. It was nice to just walk around and enjoy the city for once. 2 moved out of the way and motioned for Thomas to enter. He was hesitant, glancing around the apartment at the various knickknacks and other things he had placed. Patton walked in with just big as a smile. Nice to see you, Thomas. It's just Logan and me here, so I'll go get him. He usually works in his room. We made all sorts of things for lunch. Didn't know what you liked. 2 headed to the kitchen, motioning for the other to follow. Wow, that's a lot of food. It looks so good. You didn't have to do all this. Nonsense! 2 waved off the comment. It's food for the week, if anything. Roman and Virgil won't mind either. Logan entered the kitchen behind Patton and cleared his throat, causing both of them to turn around. Thomas, he said with a nod, pulling something from his pocket. I would like to apologize. It seems both times we have met were not quite ideal, and it caused you distress. I was hoping I could make amends. Logan stretched out his hand, and Thomas glanced down, noting that Logan had put on a glove. He smiled a bit and took it, pausing to see if it was the same warm feeling that ran up his arm. When nothing happened, he shook it with a smile. No, that's okay. Sorry I kind of freaked out and ran away. He pulled his hand back. You've been very kind, considering everything that happened. We should bring the food up and get started. Patton nodded as they carefully gathered the containers they made. Just tell us what you want to munch on, and I'll leave the rest here. Thomas insisted on helping carry something as they made their way to the roof. 3 was staring out at the city when the door opened up. He quickly greeted Thomas before leaning over to Patton, disappearing in a flash. Patton chuckled as Thomas jumped, not expecting it at all. So, Logan walked forward and took the lead. We shall start off whenever you feel comfortable, Thomas. There is no pressure to join in. If at any time you are uncomfortable, you may ask us to stop, and you are free to leave. Logan waited for a sign of approval before continuing. Yeah, I don't know where to start with all of this. Thomas rubbed his arm and shuffled his feet. Maybe kind of guide me through something? Oh, I have an idea! Patton jumped in. I never tried to see how many of me I can make. I'm not sure that is wise, Patton. We don't know how much stress that would put on you. Patton huffed at Logan. Well then, how about I just make as many as I usually stop at? We want to make Thomas comfortable, right? You have anything you would like to test out? Logan pondered and looked over at the 2 before shaking his head. Not without the other 2, and I'm not quite sure how to redo the test I did about my emotions you suggested. The one is more a long-term experiment. Oh, then mine it is. Thomas turned to Thomas. That okay, big guy? Thomas shrugged. Yeah, go ahead, I guess. Thomas walked forward to the center as Logan took his spot. He turned around and took a big breath before closing his eyes. Suddenly, 3 more copies appeared next to him. All of them looked up at once, and then at one another. So, this is 3, 4, and 5. I usually don't go farther than this. 2 ran over and joined the others. Oh, I'm 2. Hi, one of them spoke up. I'm back, it's me 3. Hello, said the next one. I'm 4. The last one smiled and waved, not saying much. Patton pointed happily at him. That's 5. He's a bit shy. So, the more you make, the more personalities differ from your own? Logan questioned. Perhaps. He held out a hand to his chin and started speaking out loud. When you make a copy, it is more an even fragment of yourself than that you then copy over to a whole person. The more you chip away, the less even the pieces. All hypothetically, of course. He looked over at them, all as they gave a varying responses back. You never made more than this? Oh, no, I've made more, but I don't let 6 out much. The Pattons glanced around at one another. 6 doesn't like the idea he's just a copy and usually tries acting different, rebelling out. It got a little bad, so I usually stop here. Then perhaps we shall keep it that way for your safety. Patton nodded, looking at all the others. Who knows what 7 would be like? Oh, I bet he'd be nice. One of them spoke out. Can we go back? Patton opened his arms and they all gathered into a group hug, disappearing in a flash. Well, that was fun. I miss those guys sometimes. You sure know how to fill up a room, Thomas joked. I'm kind of curious about it. Not as much as I am scared, though. That is quite all right. Logan turned to Thomas. Take a few deep breaths, and if you're up for it, you can try it. I believe the key might be trying to keep calm. You'll have to be prepared this time. Thomas nodded, looking up at Patton. I've tried mind reading. You want to give it a shot? Patton smiled and walked over. Just breathe in and out. Let me know when you're ready. Thomas seemed to try and shake off his nerves before taking one big breath. He looked over at Patton and nodded, looking more determined than before. Patton let out a hand, and he took it. Patton gasped a bit as the familiar feeling ran up his arm. "Oh, wow," Thomas muttered. It's quite different when you're expecting it. Oh my goodness." He grasped Patton's hand a bit tighter. "You okay?" "Yeah, how do you feel?" Patton asked, looking up at the other. "I feel kinda weird. Like, I feel full." He motioned towards his chest. "If I focus on that, maybe that's how it works." "Yeah, that's usually how I feel." "It's all the bits you all gathered up, nice and warm. You just gotta let it out." Thomas nodded and took a deep breath, closing his eyes. Logan and Patton looked on as he stood there and let out a big sigh. "Sorry, no, I can't do this. I'm too nervous." "It's okay." Patton grabbed a hold of Thomas's hand with both of his. "Don't push yourself." He nodded, smiling up at Patton. "Thanks." "You're welcome." Patton suddenly shivered, perking up at the feeling. "Oh, well, that was weird." "Are you cold, Patton? I could get you the blanket you had brought up." "I'm kind of warm," Thomas said, looking down at their hands. "It kind of feels warm when I'm doing the, Patton nodded. "It was, but it's kind of..." He let out a breath. "Different now." "Are you quite alright, Patton?" Logan queried with a note of concern. "Yeah, Patton took in another breath before swaying, ripping his hands away. Logan launched forward and caught the other before he fell, letting him sit on the ground and allowing Patton to lean on him for support. "Not feeling great anymore." "It's okay, Patton. It's okay." Logan tried not to panic. "Tell me, how do you feel right now? What changed?" Patton looked up at Logan, shaking his head. "I don't know. Lightheaded, maybe? Kinda tired and lighter." "Lighter?" Logan looked up at Thomas, who was watching them with a look of shock and panic. "Thomas, are you feeling all right?" His hand was still frozen in place, and he turned to look down at it. I don't think..." "Thomas?" He shook his head. This wasn't a good idea. I shouldn't have done this." "It's fine, Thomas. Just tell us what's worrying you." Thomas looked down at the other two. He seemed a bit paler, mouth open to speak, but too afraid to say anything. "I think I take them from you, not..." Logan jumped and looked down at Patton. "Can you make two show up? Are you feeling well enough to try?" Patton nodded and closed his eyes. A light started to shine before flickering out into nothing, causing Patton to start panting. No, it hurts." Oh. Logan looked up at Thomas, holding Patton a bit closer. "This is not your fault. We didn't know he was like this." "It was like I was draining the life from him. How is that in any way okay?" Thomas took a few steps back. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't be near you guys. I was a normal dude until you showed up, and all I do is hurt you." "No, Thomas." Patton looked up at him, smiling. "I'm slowly starting to feel better. It's okay." "No!" Thomas shouted. "None of this is okay. I'm sorry, I was willing to give this a shot. I was..." He shook his head. "But I can't. I have to go." He turned and ran to the door, throwing it open and down the stairs as fast as he could. Logan didn't move from the ground, staring at Thomas, sprinting away from the scene. He looked down at Patton and rubbed his back like he had seen Patton do before. "How are you feeling?" "I do feel a tiny bit better. Like it's all coming back." Patton cleared his throat and sat up a bit more, leaning off of Logan for support. "Thanks, Lo. Do you think he'll be okay? I'm worried about him." I don't know, he whispered back. Give him time. That's all we can do, I think. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to see the next episode, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. It is so worth it, I promise. I do cool stuff sometimes. Like this Saturday, there's going to be a really cool Cats the Musical theory. Totally off topic. I just really like that musical. It's my favorite thing right now. Not my favorite musical. My favorite musical is still Next to Normal, but my favorite research topic right now is totally Cats. It's just so interesting, the history and the lore. Damn, feeling like MatPat right now with all this lore talk. Anyway, that's a tangent. Thank you all so much for watching, and much like Patton trying to make his way back to the apartment, do your best.